Welcome, everyone. I'm Angelina Carleton, the hostess of the Design Your Legacy podcast, where I look to distill the best practices, positive examples in action, and the best ideas to inspire you. As today's affluent are two-thirds self-made, I hope to invite a variety of guests from many walks of life and income levels to bring you their insights and experiences. These guests range from family office professionals, Hollywood directors, to those in Generation Z, as they each contribute their thought leadership to this subject of legacy. I hope to provide interesting guests who challenge your beliefs with their strong bias towards optimism in how you too can value your life, time, and personal legacy. This morning, I have the pleasure of introducing Gordon Firemark, who has practiced media, entertainment, and business law in solo practice since 1992. In podcasting circles, he is known as the podcast lawyer and is the producer and host of the Entertainment Law Update podcast since 2009. He's also the author of the podcast blog and New Media Producers Legal Survival Guide. His undergraduate degree in radio, television, and film, as well as experience in live theater production, informs his thinking about all things legal. In addition to his busy law practice, he teaches entertainment law at Columbia College Hollywood, intellectual property and media law at the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising, as well as contract law at Pepperdine Law School. Welcome, Gordon.
Wow, Angelina, thank you. That introduction could take up the whole time of the episode, but thank you for doing that. I'm glad to be here.
Wonderful. And I thought that this was a very good topic to bring forward to the listeners and viewers because, like I mentioned before, I started podcasting a year ago and I didn't know all of the nuances. And I think that some of these distinctions are very important because if somebody chooses, when it comes to podcasting or another form of what I call intellectual property, and they don't know something, not only could they find themselves with a headache, but they could be blindsided by something that they don't even need to deal with. So I call this kind of like, preventive maintenance.
Well, that is exactly why I do what I do. I value the multitude of voices. It's important to me that we have conversation about the issues, the controversies, the things that are important in life, in society, and whatever. And I think that everybody should have an opportunity to share their message, their ideas, and have their impact. Whether we agree with what they're saying or not, everybody should have that opportunity. And oftentimes people come into, in particular, podcasting, because it's a very low barrier to entry. It's very easy to start a podcast without any background or knowledge or understanding of what goes into media production and media development and distribution. And that's where they start to run into these problems of no training as a journalist, no background or experience as a producer. And then they encounter these intellectual property and contract and privacy and defamation and all the kinds of things that we as lawyers, of course, have to think about every day.
Right,
so I'm here to educate and share and get people the information they need to be safe while they're doing stuff.
Delightful. Yes. And I realize when podcasting gets good and people start to tune in, it can bring naysayers and a whole host of diverse opinions. And in today's divisive society, somebody has to kind of be prepared. Okay, so let me go to the first question, if you're ready. Okay, so as creative expression may be a part of an individual's holistic legacy plan, what are the most important things that they, whether they're an online entrepreneur, a live streamer, a creative person, what should they do to protect themselves and get positioned for success?
Well, first off, I say they should have the mindset that they're already in the place of success. In sales, they talk about assume the sale, that the transaction is going to happen. In life, we should assume that we are achieving the things we set out to achieve, and in fact, put ourselves in the position of already having done so. A lot of us are, when I have this thing or this much money or this whatever, then I'll do this stuff that I need to do to be that person. That's backwards. Be the person, do the things, and you'll have the things that the trappings, right? So that's my sort of philosophy about that. So the mindset is number one. After that, planning and then doing the things that professionals, experts, people do. And to my way of thinking, that means having a structure to whatever you're doing. If it's a business or an enterprise, I talk to podcasters a lot, so I think they should have a business legal structure like a corporation or an LLC or something that helps manage the relationships among the creators and founders of the thing. And then there's the team structure as well. So you've got to have a legit business structure, a legit team, and then you need to know about this intellectual property and the other sort of legal aspects of content that I alluded to. And finally, you have to know who your customers are, what your clients are after, and how the structure of the relationships there, so you can sell and
Yes.
make money or whatever you're trying to do.
Yes. So I want to just highlight something you said that I thought was very important, which is we can think of, the success as being really far away. And you had spoke about assuming the sale, assume the optimistic win, right?
Yeah.
And so I just want to highlight for a moment, we can think of a legacy being far away, and yet it's important to start today. So whether somebody is, like I mentioned to you before, under age 40, which many of the listeners of this podcast are, or over age 40, and they've just come into retirement and they are finally planting the seeds and starting the actions of their legacy, that they start with that optimistic mindset, as you mentioned.
Optimistic mindset, absolutely, but also living today the way people who have the kind of legacy you desire to leave live. And that may mean some austerity sometimes. It may be, living affluent, making smart investments, of course. Don't wait to start. Get it done now. Be that person from the beginning, and you'll arrive at the end with more than you could have hoped.
Yes. Yes. Very good. Very good. All right. So let's go to the dark stuff of the mistakes. Dun, dun, dun.
Well, the mistakes that I see are, sort of those four pillars that I mentioned. Not structuring things, whether it's, as I said, a business, an enterprise, whatever it is, just going about it and, throwing it against the wall, see what sticks. That's great when you're cooking spaghetti. It's not so great when you're trying to build a legacy, when you're trying to create something that you're going to leave to the next generation and the next, whatever that might be, the business, the money, the impact. So having some structure for it, whether it's an LLC, a corporation, a trust, those kinds of things. The other mistake that people make is being too keen to engage in teamwork, partnering up with everybody who comes along. And then you have people fighting over ownership, fighting over control, fighting over revenue, fighting over the stupid little stuff sometimes. So I think that in the podcasting world, I refer to folks as, you should have a podcast prenup, some kind of clarity. Whenever you're getting into a new relationship with people who are going to be part of your team, there should be clarity of what that relationship is and what they get and what you get and what they don't get, and those kinds of things, so that when all is said and done, your intent is brought to be reality.
Right.
In the podcasting and all the media production space, another mistake that everybody makes is using other people's stuff, intellectual property. And podcasters love to think, well, this is just like radio, so I'm just going to play some songs and talk about them in between.
Yeah. And so, before I mentioned this morning that I didn't include music, but only because I didn't know how to. But I could think of so many podcasters who sample other people's music, and then they put Creative Commons or some type of statement in their YouTube show notes. And what a huge surprise, because it like you mentioned, it's more than just asking the artist.
Yeah. And in fact, often the artist doesn't even own or control the material that they've created, because they were paid by a record company and they have contracts with publishers and things. So you really do have to understand a little bit about how intellectual property comes into being, how it is owned, and how it needs to be licensed when you want to use things. You need permission. Just like if I wanted to come and sleep on your couch, I would need permission. I can't just walk in the front door and lay there.
Yeah, but I find it so fascinating how many individuals who upload music and content on even just YouTube as one platform will borrow other people's material and never think about it. And I guess a part of the equation is, will the other side do something?
So YouTube in particular, and Facebook and a number of the other sites, they have these algorithms that catch the stuff. And YouTube in particular has developed relationships with the large owners of lots of music that basically just says, when we catch this, do we have your permission to monetize it and split the money with you and the creator of the video or whatever? And so they're sort of happy to go along with that nowadays. But it's only a limited catalog of music. Sometimes someone uses a piece of music in a video and the algorithm catches that it's there and then says to the owner, hey, we're going to take it down, or we're going to take the soundtrack out. And a video without a soundtrack isn't something that most people stick around and watch through to the end. So yeah, I mean, that's some of the consequences. Then if the actual copyright owner is unhappy about something, there are mechanisms, especially here in the US, just to get it taken down very quickly. And we on my side of things, we see it happening fairly often. Most users who haven't ever experienced it never know that their favorite video or YouTuber or podcast episodes were taken down, because it's just not there.
Yeah.
They never, yeah. So and then of course lawsuits are the big guns when someone's really unhappy about it.
Yeah, yeah. So let's cover a few more of the nightmare stories, and then I want to get into the basics of like what is a copyright for any of the viewers or listeners. But I just want to go again to the dark side for a moment, so that if somebody gets blindsided, they can't say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so surprised! I didn't realize that could even happen." Like for instance, you mentioned a moment ago that there are algorithms and AI formulas out there that it's not even that the individual who made the content is up late at night looking at everyone else's video or doing keyword searches. There's technology these days. So what are some of the other things that you've heard of from other podcasters or clients, or just being in the industry? Because I know you read a lot of like legal journals and so forth.
You know, I mean, the lawsuits are the nightmare. Nobody in their right mind, other than lawyers, wants to have lawsuits going on. So, but yeah, but there can be all kinds of things that give rise to those lawsuits. Another area in intellectual property that we often aren't really thinking about is trademark law. And a trademark is a brand, you know, a name, a logo, a phrase that is used to identify the source of something, just like the brands that we used to sear into the hide of a cattle, you know, tell you which ranch that cow came from. That's a trademark. Well, choosing a title for your business, your show, your product line, whatever it is about choosing a brand that will be effective at communicating what you're all about and what you're doing. But you have to be very careful. So often, and especially in the podcasting space, for some reason, people choose titles that are already in use, and we'll have 3 or 4 or 5 different podcasts with basically the same or very similar titles. And you know, there's 2 sides to this. One, choose something distinctive. Don't choose something that's going to, you know, you don't want to be just another one of the coffee podcasts. You want to be the podcast on the subject that you're talking about. So choose carefully, but protect what you do. So if you do adopt a title and you're sort of first in line there with it, get the protection in place so that you have the right to stop those others from competing with you in that sort of unfair way.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that there's actually another podcast called Design Your Legacy.
Is that right?
And I just learned about it in the past couple of days. And I was like, wow, but she hasn't contacted me. I haven't contacted her. I'm not exactly sure, but like, do we just go on?
It may be possible and fine and perfectly comfortable to coexist in the marketplace that way. It may be as simple as both of you agreeing to add the with Angelina Carleton.
Sure.
Or something like that.
And I'm not even sure that her and I have the same niche market regarding who we are targeting.
But, you know, the search engine, I should say the podcast directories are essentially search engines. So if somebody searches for her and finds you and starts listening and then forgets about her, she's not going to be too happy about that, and vice versa. So, you know, my point of view, of course, as a lawyer who does these things, is that it makes sense to get out ahead of these things as quickly as you can. Right. Because again, if you're relatively new to podcasting, changing the title is easier after 5 or 10 episodes than it is after 200.
Right. Correct. Yes. So, preventive maintenance and proactive actions. Yes. Okay. So, and I'm not sure if this would be legal advice or not, but how would one get a trademark?
Well, you know,
and what is infringement? Okay.
I'm sorry. So getting a trademark is as simple as adopting the brand and use it in interstate commerce, very much the way you have with the title of your podcast or something like that. The scope of protection for that can be fairly narrow. It can be limited geographically. It could be limited to very specifically only what you're doing in your region. So it makes sense to register the trademark federally. And that's with the United States Patent and Trademark Office. It's part of the Department of Commerce, and it's an official government agency. And it operates at the speed you would expect from a government agency. But with that said, once that trademark registration is in place, it's a very powerful tool in the arsenal if somebody does come along and adopt something confusingly similar, because you can right off the bat say, hey, if you had done a simple search, you would have found this. So stop using that name right now, those kinds of things. And, 9 times out of 10 in these smaller spaces where, we're not dealing with very well-financed companies, they don't want to litigate these kinds of things. So then someone agrees to make a change or shift perspective on things and those kinds of things. So getting a trademark comes from use, and the registration, or I should say that registration is a nation by nation thing. And when you're dealing with an international medium, it may become necessary to register in more than one country and those kinds of things. So it can become a journey to do this, but starting here at home is always a good way to go.
Very nice, very nice. And what is infringement and fair use?
So infringement is the word we use to reference unauthorized use of someone's intellectual property, or violation of someone's rights, I guess you could say. So in the trademark space, it's that adopting of a confusingly similar trademark or service mark. In copyright, which, copyright, it protects works of expression, not the ideas themselves, but the way we write out those ideas or spell them out or record them or make a film or a sculpture. All those kinds of things are protected by copyright law. Using one of the rights that belongs to that copyright owner without permission is infringement. So making copies, making things that are derivative based upon the original, performing or displaying the original work without consent, all of those things can be infringement, and distributing the copies as well, of course. So basically, unauthorized copying is infringement.
Yes. Very good, very good. I just think about, for instance, if someone's legacy includes expressing themselves, not just with like a vision statement and so forth, but in today's knowledge economy, it seems like more people are willing to hop online, and a podcast could be a part of them sharing their knowledge. And so, yes, I think that these nuances are very important, because nobody wants to do a bunch of work or come across a crossroads where, again, they're blindsided.
Well, right. I mean, for example, you and I sitting down to record this podcast, you as the creator, and because of the agreement we have between us, you are the owner of this podcast episode. And I'm making my mark by contributing knowledge and information, but ultimately it's your legacy to leave this library of content,
yes,
for the rest of the world to enjoy and experience and learn from. So that's a tremendous legacy, and it has value. And it's important that we don't dismiss the value of that content.
Yes. One of the things that came up before was medium or the message, and I think, you had talked about, I think, like some other podcasters that got attacked for their message. Do you want to cover that at all? I think it was in a prior conversation.
Yeah, we can touch base on that. So the expression, the medium is the message, is actually from a futurist, a technology. I don't know how to describe him, but a fellow named Marshall McLuhan in the 1960s came up with this idea that the medium is the message. At the time, he was talking about television and film to that certain extent. Woody Allen adopted that philosophy about his works and things. Anyway, but recently, as you said, there have been a number of situations where the message has become such a touchstone issue that people get very excited and upset about, that they've lashed out at the medium in response. So, for example, when the number one big podcaster, who I'm not going to name, starts talking about issues that relate to the pandemic that we've been going through. And
I say the name, or should I not?
yeah, let's leave it out. Everybody knows what we're talking about. But there's been a bunch of musicians said, hey, take my stuff off of that platform because I don't like that you're carrying that podcast. And a bunch of other people have sort of reacted in the other way, saying he's great and he should have his voice, which I agree with. I'm actually among the people who took my content off of that particular platform, just not as a protest, but just I just don't want to do business with a company that isn't ready to be exercise a little bit of oversight on these kinds of things. So, and that again is my right as a copyright owner of my podcast episodes. I get to say where they go and where they don't go. And that's how I preserve my legacy.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay, very good. So let's cover naysayers just for a quick second, and then we'll move on to some more questions. But let's say there is a naysayer that doesn't like somebody's opinion that's out there. I know you've mentioned before about due diligence, journalistic ethics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, cancel culture has become a thing, right? That's the naysayers basically trying to get our podcaster in question taken off of his major platform.
Right.
My personal belief system is that is not an appropriate approach. While I will exercise my right to take my stuff off, I'm not telling them they should take his off.
Yeah, so I want to say something about that right now. So on one hand, it's very interesting because podcasting is such a human, it brings such a human element that
Mm-hmm.
people then can see a person as like, Gordon is more than an attorney. We get to see him speak. He becomes human. He drinks from his cup. It's like, he's like me. I like him. I trust him. I'm going to do business with him. Right. In some ways, I think about the metaphor of like Jennifer Lopez. And the story with her is when she had dated Ben Affleck back in the day, she got attacked right by the media, every tabloid cover and so forth. Pardon the phone. Okay. And yet, there were so many stereotypes and presumptions. Then she goes on American Idol, and America and the rest of the world gets to see her as kind and funny. And it just did wonders for her career and so forth. And I thought, well, that's very interesting. Isn't that what podcasting is doing by making us less strangers to one another?
Yeah, that's an interesting point of view. I think, you're right. I think it gives people a deeper understanding of the people that they're talking. In fact, that's one of the reasons that I've chosen to use podcasting as a marketing tool in my business, my law practice. And I've made mistakes in how I've done that. But my feeling was, look, when people come in the door and don't know anything about me, especially with lawyers, people tend to be afraid, of that experience. Coming to a law office, it's in a high-rise building. I just had a hassle getting here, and the parking and everything else. And how many thousands of dollars is this going to cost me? That's the fear is there, right? And we lawyers can be, especially with the deep voice, and we can be intimidating. But if I do my podcast where I and another lawyer joke around and talk about cases and things like that, and I have my website and I'm visible, people can see my smile and hopefully hear it in my voice, that diffuses some of that. It allows them to feel like they know and they like me and hopefully trust me.
Right. And lawyers are humans too.
Right, exactly. And know, like, and trust is what drives every decision to purchase, really, or to hire.
Yeah. And to decrease the fear factor.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like you had said before, if lawyers are deemed to be intimidating, then they can hear kind of how you approach the subject, what it is, how you respond on the spot. And then, then you get to be human. And that's where I'm pointing the flashlight. In today's world of technology, I think humans still need community and knowledge. And what's your thought?
Well, it's a double-edged sword, because if you're a jerk, people can see that too.
Sometimes, yes.
Assuming that you're not really good at acting and faking.
Yeah. If you're not like doing the great acting job. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're not a jerk and people can see.
My plan to keep you fooled is working.
Okay, very good. Okay. So speaking of legacies, I realize I'm putting you on the spot probably right here, but how do you define this word? Like, I know, for instance, lawyers love definitions, and the etymology of this word has, its history back to the 14th century and so forth. But for you, do you define it from a very humanistic standpoint or more from that legal Merriam-Webster's?
I think my definition of it is a more humanistic definition than legal or even a business. I mean, yeah, I think that a legacy, a legatee, a legator, a legacy is the thing that you leave, your business that you leave for other people to finish after you're gone, in a sense. And I guess it fits that, and sometimes that's the legacy is what happens with your estate, your money when you're done, or your property. For me, a legacy is about leaving an impact, giving people information, education they can use, whether I'm here to help them with it or not. And so they can create their impact, and that will have a cascading effect, get the messages out. And the most important impact and message that I think I can have is on my 3 children. And if I can leave good people behind who will do good works, service of whatever kind they choose, and continue the idea of having an impact by touching other people with whatever it is, that's an important and powerful legacy. And whether I die rich or poor, if I have those kinds of people that I'm leaving behind, and my students, I count among this as well, I think that is a kind of wealth that can't be replaced.
Brilliant, brilliant. So it's the idea of you more than just the tangibles.
Yeah, learn from me and follow my lead and take it to the next step, I guess you could say, whatever that is for each person. But being a good person is the most important part for my kids.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the things we also talked about before we started recording is, what I brought up, this concept of positive role models, because I think that in today's day and age, we need more choices than just what might be immediately around us, especially with the pandemic bringing a lot of tragedy, but also just more than the professional athletes and celebrities and so forth. I think that there's something about when the ordinary gets to become the extraordinary, and if you can create this and get to teach as a professor at 3 different schools and impart your character to your children, then I think that's also someone who maybe doesn't have a good father, for instance, it's just for example, could be, on the sidelines looking, and they go, okay, that's great. And I think, one of the things that also happens with podcasts is, especially if the individual can see it, is you get to model it, which is much more powerful than, talking the talk.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So I'm going to put you on the spot again. So are there any guiding principles or values that you would honor with your legacy?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I mentioned at the very top of the show that my most important value is speech, sharing, communicating, getting messages out.
Okay.
I think integrity is an important value, and that is being true to myself, to my word, and always adhering to the values. That is, doing work that advances my mission of helping people get their message out.
Yeah, and coming from that position of strength.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to touch upon one other legal thing, and it is the concept of opinion. If opinion is protected speech, or does it hurt someone's reputation regarding slander and libel? And I just wanted you to talk about that for a moment, because I know in the pursuit of happiness and the Constitution, in the amendment of free speech, what are some of the landmines with that, in addition to someone getting to voice, their own unique view, let's say outside of mainstream media?
Well, the law, excuse me, the law it's full of these sort of inherent contradictions. The Constitution says life, liberty, and happiness, and it also says, Congress it says we have a right to free speech. There's also a provision in the Congress in the Constitution that says Congress should make a law protecting authors and inventors, so that the way it's been interpreted is so that others don't copy their stuff. Well, that's an inherent conflict with the First Amendment, right? Free speech. Ooh. And don't copy. So that's where the concept of fair use, which is a defense in copyright infringement claims, comes up. The judges over the course of the 20th century had to come up with an approach to reconciling this conflict, and they did this. It's a complicated sort of balancing test that was set up. Well, the same is true with free speech and the law of defamation, or libel and slander. Libel is the electronic, printed, published version, and slander is the spoken word, one-to-one kind of communication. And it's publishing a message that is false, that hurts a person's reputation or standing in the community. And when we have, again, it's a conflict. You can't you can't tell lies about people, but what about free speech, right? So
Yeah.
same kinds of conflicts. Now, opinion, the way we can address that is by saying, well, look, if I have an opinion about a person, I don't think that person is a very worthwhile person. I would never invest with that person, something like that.
Yeah.
That's my opinion, and I genuinely hold it, so it's true.
But
Now, that person may be a perfectly legitimate, upstanding person, business person, but they've just rubbed me the wrong way. So I can express my opinion as long as I don't make it a fact that that person's a crook.
Yeah.
So the statements about people can fall on this sort of spectrum, and as soon as you cross over that line to where it appears to be factual, that's where we run into trouble with defamation. And so opinions are, as long as it's a genuinely held opinion. There's a funny case I'll just tell you about that goes back in my practice in theater law. I found this case where a theater director had launched a new play, and this critic came and wrote a scathing review of the play. Well, it turns out that the critic is his brother-in-law and had never even seen the play. He just wanted to take his brother-in-law down. So the lawsuit went forward over the defamation, the libel of this play and this playwright. And it came out that he hadn't seen the show, and it wasn't a genuinely held opinion. It was motivated by something other than wanting to inform the public about the reality of things. So even though he expressed it in the terms of opinion, because it wasn't really his opinion, it didn't count. So he lost. Be careful when you go.
Yeah. And I think it is also such a fine line if somebody says, it appears that, Joe or Sally, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If let's say you're an influencer, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and you could say, it appears that this particular sneaker or tennis shoe, ... And then, kind of like Oprah and the beef so many decades ago.
The pink slime story. Yeah. For those who don't know what we're talking about, go Google pink slime and Oprah, and you'll find out all about how Oprah single-handedly seemed to destroy the beef industry for 6 months or so. Anyway.
Which is that individual's influence. So even if it's their opinion. Yeah.
Well, right. And that's an important, I guess, to speak in comic book terms, Spider-Man, right? With great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
And I think as influencers, as people who are doing media, it is incumbent upon us to think hard about the things we're saying and doing, and the impact that they will have on other people. It doesn't mean we shouldn't express a genuinely held opinion, but we got to decide, is it right to do so?
Right, and the effects.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so on a positive note, has there been anyone that has inspired you or that inspires you today, whether it's history or art?
I think whenever people ask me about my inspiration, my first go-to is my father. He was a physician, a healer in the true sense of the word. And I would say he's where I learned these principles of integrity and morality and discipline, I guess you could say. And he passed away a long time ago, but I hear his voice in my head almost every day. Hopefully most of the time saying, "Good job, I'm proud of you." But every once in a while, "Hey, what were you thinking?" So he is sort of my conscience in many ways. And my mom also, but she's still around, so she doesn't get the same kind of credit, I guess. And I'd say there are a few teachers in my life, going back as far as high school. Probably nobody stands out before high school, but there's a couple of people from high school and a couple of college and law school professors who have really shown me the way, I guess you could say, shine a light on the path and led me to become the man I am. And so that's the kind of inspiration. As far as, in the space of art and culture, I think everybody, all the artists, all the creators out there inspire me in one way or another, because it's an incredibly brave, courageous thing to do, to put your heart onto canvas or film or whatever it is. And I mean, you as a podcaster, same thing. I mean, you're putting yourself out there in a way that, yes, it's about humanizing you and making you visible in new ways, but there's risk associated with it. You could become the next podcaster who gets attacked for one of your views or even your guest's view. But also, you're doing a kind of work that's so important. I find that very inspirational.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that, and let me circle that back to coaching for a moment. One of the things that happens with coaching work is when the client starts to change, the people around them can like it or they cannot like it. So I
Yeah.
think what you're pointing to for a moment is, if I go back to that word of influence, let's say there's a podcast show, as I put my neck on the line, I put myself out there, that could influence some young adult, and maybe their parent doesn't like it or someone in their world doesn't like it. Absolutely. And then there are those side effects that we may think about, or they could be, blind spots that we might not even ever consider regarding, giving someone hope, as well as, building an educational library that can obviously influence and strengthen their journey going forward.
Yeah. So many people in the world, I mean, we all have our vision, we have our dreams, we have our ideas. It's the ones who take the bold step of actually going out and sharing it, finding a way to communicate that. That's what really I find inspirational. And if you think about it, so many people never do. They go through their life, they have their vision, their dream, and they get up and they go to the job and they come home and they drink their beer and they watch TV and they go to bed. And that's their whole routine, without ever taking some extra step to get it out there. And so here's to all of the creators, whatever your medium, I salute you.
Yes. Very good. Very good. So let's talk for a moment about individuals that do find themselves at what I call kind of that slippery slope of life, where it is just, they're dog paddling and they're not moving ahead. So was there anything that you had to face internally that you're willing to share, just even to touch on the surface? It could be internal, external, philosophical.
Well, so anybody who looks at me now and sees me doing Facebook and Facebook Live and YouTube and podcasts and being a guest on things and getting on stages and speaking would never think this is a guy who was a shy kid. But I was a very shy kid. And I had a lot of self-doubt, a lot of low self-esteem as I came to, even as I was starting in practice of law 30 something years ago. I just never really believed fully in myself and the way I could operate in the world and the kind of impact I could have until, it's quite a while back now, but I sort of had the crisis of confidence around the time my father passed, actually. And I guess somewhere inside it was, okay, you can't just follow him anymore. You got to become the leader that he was. And so maybe that's it. But we all struggle. We talk about humanizing ourselves and others. I had a period where I was very depressed, and fortunately I got some help and got that taken care of, and I can say I'm not depressed now. I'm a jolly old man. And I love being able to share. And I guess what I've gotten in touch with is how inspiring it is for me to touch other people and teach and help people understand the world we live in from the legal standpoint, the stuff that I'm good at.
Yeah. I think it was Tony Robbins who once said that the secret of living is giving.
That's really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that one, or maybe I had, but
yeah, but we have to always get to that place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And sometimes things have that, they crumble before they get rebuilt.
And one of the things about that is in order to be a giver, you have to have enough self-esteem to believe that you have something to give.
Yeah.
And not the imposter syndrome, which is a very common thing, even podcasters, right? When you do a show every week, there are going to be those days where, well, who's going to listen to me? Why should I be the one talking about this thing? And overcoming that is mostly just about pushing through and trusting, having faith that in yourself and in the higher powers, whatever you choose to believe in, leading you in the direction you're meant to go.
Yeah. Very good. Very insightful. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing for that moment.
Oh, my pleasure.
And I absolutely agree that I think that somebody has to be in alignment with their purpose, but maybe if they're watching you and they consider that they too can find something, whether they're in college right now or they're wherever they are in their stage of life, that when you share your story, that then it can deposit some hope in their world. It is about perspective.
Yeah. If you don't mind, I'll share a little will call it an exercise, I guess you could
Okay, please,
say,
please.
that I find really helpful with my coaching clients and students is, if you don't already sort of have clarity on what's my purpose, what do I believe in, why am I here? And I'm not, this is, look, this is not the ultimate answer. It's just an approach, is to ask yourself, what do I believe in? What's important to me? But don't stop there. And maybe it helps to have somebody actually ask you the question, why? And I call this, someone else coined the phrase, but they called it a 7-layer dip. So you keep asking why, 7 or more layers deep. Why is that important? Why do you believe that? Why is that important? Why is that, what does that mean for you? And if you spend the real time to really think about this stuff and be vulnerable with yourself and the people around you, I think you can really get in touch with your purpose, with your mission, with what underlying ultimate value drives everything you do. And that's the beginning of the real journey.
Very good. Very good. So if I were to put you on the spot for a moment, so you probably know your mission and your purpose, and you have touched upon your legacy.
Mm-hmm.
So why is your legacy important?
It's all ego. No.
But
I believe that we only have this one world that we are in. We are all in it together on this journey, traveling around the universe and around the sun. And if we aren't going to learn to be together in it and get along and take care of our body, and in body I refer to the larger whole, the earth, the universe, everything, we're, as a race, as a world, we are destined to not last much longer.
As the human race.
Well, not just, our planet is, we have a finite resources and finite access to the things that we need. So yeah, not just humanity, but all life on our planet theoretically could go the way of extinction. And it's funny, I've never really voiced this myself out loud before, but I really think that we all have to get along, and we have to take care of ourselves and each other. And as a race, I think we can do so much if we let ourselves. And squabbles and conflicts and disagreements over sort of stupid stuff in the scheme of things really get in the way of accomplishing amazing things. So
yes,
let's achieve the amazing.
Absolutely. Bravo. Very good. Okay. So what is the hardest part of what you do? The easiest, the most interesting, the most fun?
Okay. Well, the hardest thing there, I'm going to give you 2 hard parts. One is delivering bad news. Sometimes as a lawyer, the client's just wrong or there's just no way for them to succeed with whatever it is. Hopefully that doesn't happen too often. I view my role as being a creative one to help find the solutions.
Yeah. Are these Dale Carnegie moments?
I guess maybe. Sometimes the solution is just, hey, don't do that.
Okay. Because I don't know if you could say to a client, like, you are wrong.
Sometimes that's the job, and that's the hard part.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
I also, a lawyer who isn't good with confrontation, but that's me. I don't enjoy being confrontational. I don't enjoy the arguing so much. I enjoy the banter and the negotiation style of argument. I don't enjoy fighting over things. So maybe that drives my whole vision that we were talking about a minute ago as well. So the confrontation and the bad news are the bad parts, the hardest things that for me.
And what's interesting is that some attorneys, they love to argue.
Oh yeah. No, they live for the confrontation. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm blessed. I discovered early on in my career as a lawyer, I worked for a litigation firm very briefly for a very good litigator who is a bulldog and just not somebody you want to come up against in court or a dark alley. And he'd be laughing to hear me say that. But I learned that just wasn't me. I was taking it home with me at night. I just wasn't able to put it aside. And I got to be sort of, that burning ulcer in the stomach was the signal, hey, this isn't right for you.
Yeah. Not a bulldog.
I'm a bulldog with
when you need to be.
when it's my bone that I'm looking to hold on to, but I don't relish the fight at all. No.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting, I might be putting my foot in my mouth a bit here, but I've heard that I don't want to say mental illness in the legal profession
Mm.
is, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. It's interesting. All of the professions, not just lawyers, but doctors as well, very high suicide rates
Because of the
relative to
pressure?
the pressure and and the need to be at our best all the time. Failure
Okay.
is not an option, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I think there's a lot of drug use among lawyers, and there's a lot of alcoholism, and there's a high suicide rate. And a lot of lawyers, when asked, just a few years into practice, if you had it to do over again, would you go to law school? The answer is no. I'd choose anything. I'd rather dig ditches, but I'm here now is
Interesting.
what I do.
That's very honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been approached about, would you coach attorneys on their legacy? And I have not yet approached that market or come
Mm.
close to it. Cause yeah, it's this idea of, I don't know if I want to get into, because coaching can be confrontational sometimes. If
Yeah.
you're calling the SHIT out, you're calling someone's stuff out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And lawyers, just coach to coach, lawyers will argue their limitations really, really well.
Yes. Yes.
And they'll
Yeah.
convince you that you're the one who's wrong. So
Yeah.
be careful.
Yeah. So just another quick question, and then we'll kind of
Yeah.
go to some closing thoughts. And I'm going to ask you again what you'd like your legacy to be. But do you think with the drug use and so forth, alcoholism, do you think that's the escape, or do you think that's the thing that helps them perform at that highest level, even if it's burning the midnight oil for them?
Oh, I think it's probably some of each for each different person. It's self-medication in many
Mm.
ways for people. And as we look at the kinds of people who've used certain drugs over the course of history, and we think about it in terms of self-medication, people who are depressed seek certain kinds of things that will help them function better. And so, yeah, I think that's definitely a part of it. And the escape, yeah, certainly people just sometimes enjoy being able to cut loose and feel outside of themselves in some way. And yeah, that's
Yeah.
an
Well,
interesting question.
I think to circle back to something you mentioned before, it's important to know, why are you doing the things that you're doing? Like,
Mhm.
in other words, what are your beliefs? And
Yeah.
that seven fold, would you
Seven-layer
call it?
dip. Yeah.
Yeah. To understand, what were the reasons why you got into this?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that the more you are in touch with those deeper answers,
The
the
foundation.
less you're going to experience the emotional upsets and call it mental illness or the substance abuse or all of these things. Even just anger management gets easier when you know why you're here, because you know
Yeah.
what to let roll off your back, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I just want
So
to say one more thing about that, which is
mhm.
I was interviewing a gentleman, and he had done triathlons and so forth. And he said sometimes that those extreme sports are the place where the individual can release their anger, because they don't
Yeah.
have control in other areas of their life, and they don't have the tools to know how to get that control. So if I were to echo for a moment again about what is it, the 7-layer dip?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that that's something that's very simple and basic that anybody can do wherever they are in this world, to peel the onion.
And do it often. It's
Yeah.
not just a one and done. You got to keep coming back to it and asking what's changed. Why am I doing this? Is that still true? That reality check is important. And you can and by the way, you can start the 7-layer dip with any behavior that
Yeah.
you have. If you have a habit that you want to get rid of, ask yourself, why do I do this? Why did I start doing this? What was underlying that? Why was that important at the time? And is it still,
Yeah.
um, and go from, and as a shrink once said to me, if it's not one thing, it's your mother.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and I think that the 7-layer dip again is important, because again, is it your beliefs or is it someone else's beliefs that were
Mhm.
instilled in you, and you're holding fast to those beliefs because you're not ready yet to pull away and become your own island independent, which is a scary
Yeah,
as well as a thrilling process in personal development. But I think in being true to ourselves in this lifetime, I think all of those growing pains only lead to better places and better
absolutely.
mindsets. in trusting ourselves more. Yeah. Okay. Very good sense of humor. Okay. Would you tell me one more time what you'd like your legacy to be? And then we'll move to closing thoughts.
If I am doing it right, when I am finished on this earth, I will have created or helped, and my wife gets a lot of the credit, but we will have created 3 extraordinarily kind, good, helpful, leader type human beings. And my children, Nate, Lily, and Ben, who are 13, 11, and 8 right now, I have high hopes because they're looking good so far.
Very good. Very good. And any closing thoughts? Do you have any websites you'd like to share or?
Well, anybody who's interested in the kind of work that I do and hearing more from me for whatever reason can follow me on social media. The handle is Firemark. That's GFIREMARK. And you can go to firemark.com if you want to find my website. Entertainment Law Update is the monthly podcast. Exactly what it sounds like, a review of case law and those kinds of things. And you can also just go to gordonfiremark.com, which is sort of a clearinghouse for most of the stuff that I do.
Very good. Very good. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I just want to highlight before we I read my my closing thoughts. Yeah. That I appreciate the honesty that you've brought to this conversation, to show your humanity, but also to bring the knowledge, because again, not just with what people need to know when it comes to trademark and copyright and the tools legally that are available to them so that they are protected, but also that you brought that, the 7-layer dip, so that even, in their journey, as they are a creator or, creating their legacy, even in all the different aspects, that they can be, again, protected and strengthened. And I think that, I see you more as a teacher than an attorney, but obviously because you're teaching in your legal role. So it's not that you're, beating someone over the head and arguing with them, but rather empowering and enabling them to, be the best that they can be.
And thank you for saying that. And in reality, I view my work as a lawyer very much of the time as teaching my clients how to do the things the right way or what needs to be done, because yes, they can hire me to do it for them sometimes, but they won't have to hire me to do it for them if they get it right without, messing up along the way. So probably takes money out of my own pocket when I do it that way, but that's okay. I'm here to help. I want people to achieve their dreams, get their messages out, and have an impact on the world. And if I can be, I've always been behind the scenes guy, and this is no different. I want to just help it happen, and I'll stand by and enjoy your applause.
Very good. Okay, so in closing, I'm Angelina Carleton, the hostess of the Design Your Legacy podcast, as well as the founder to Legacy Planning, a boutique coaching and advisory firm based out of Beverly Hills, California, but international in those I coach. I hope to dive deep into subjects that can help a person define, develop, and execute their legacy, and continue to scour the landscape for those who can be great resources to every dimension of your legacy. For many listeners, there can never be enough education and preparation in their moot around the castle. Whether you find yourself with new wealth or generational wealth, may the content of this channel be an anchor in any storms ahead. We do our best to provide original content for your intellectual and emotional curiosity. Thank you for joining us today. And remember, I coach people on the subject of personal legacies. I hope you find these podcast interviews entertaining in their education. Thank you so much for joining us today.